You're listening to the Options Insider Radio Network, the home of the Options Podcast. For more quality options programs, visit theoptionsinsider.com or search for Options Insider Radio Network in your podcast provider of choice. Listeners can also access all of our programming through our mobile app available in the iTunes and Google Play stores. Select programs are also available via live stream at mixlr.com/options-insider. That's mixlr.com/options-insider. Don't forget to follow along with your favorite programs and submit your own questions for the hosts at twitter.com/options, stocktwits.com/options, facebook.com/theoptionsinsider, or via questions at theoptionsinsider.com. And now, it's time for the show that breaks down the options market from unusual activity alerts to market analysis, strategy overviews, listener questions, and much more. If it involves puts and calls, then our all-star panel will break it down. It's time to hit the Option Block with your host, Mark Longo from the Options Insider Media Group, and co-hosts, Uncle Mike Tusaw from St. Charles Wealth Management, along with Mark the Greasy Meatball Sebastian and Andrew the Rock Lobster GIOVINAZZI from OptionPit.com. And now, get ready to hit the Option Block.
All right, everybody. That music means we are back. Once again, it is time for the program that is beloved far and wide, hither and yon, as the Option Block. My name is Mark Longo from theoptionsinsider.com, as well as, of course, from the ever-scintillating, ever-compelling Options Insider Radio Network. Reminding you, if you like what you hear, keep rating and reviewing on your platform of choice. If your platform doesn't allow it, sometimes they don't, then by all means, you can check out our app in all the various app stores. You have iTunes, you have, of course, Google Play, even the Amazon Fire app store. It's in there as well. And a lot of people like to leave their ratings and reviews there as well. Whatever floats your boat, it does help the new folks continue to discover the content. And clearly there are a lot of new folks out there. So we love to show them a light in these dark and stormy seas. So keep rating and reviewing if you like what you hear. And of course, if you need more content in your lives, and who can blame you? We all do. These days, you want great pro Q&As. At Tony Saliba last week, we had Steve Sosnick, the chief options strategist over there at IB, answering your questions this week. We got Options Oddities every Friday. We got great giveaways coming up soon. We're going to be giving away the October Pro Trading Crate for all of you pro members. I want to do it when the gang's all assembled. And alas, we do not have Uncle Mike on the program yet again. So I think he'll be back on Monday. So maybe the winner of the wrestling business on Monday will be allowed to choose the winner of the Pro Trading Crate. So stay tuned for that. Those are always fun. It's no small amount of effort and expense for our team here to put those together and ship those out to you. But you know what? We like you folks. You guys love them. People are trying to buy them. You can't buy them. Only place you can get them is theoptionsinsider.com/pro. And that puts your name in the hat. And let's see who's joining us with his name in the hat this week. We're going all the way out to the dark and stormy shores of Maine, where we are joined once again by the rockingest of lobsters, Mr. Andrew GIOVINAZZI from OptionPit.com. Mr. G, welcome back to the show yet again, sir.
It's good to be here. I feel like I haven't been here for a week, but I guess all my action is just in the end of the week.
It does feel like you and I haven't chatted in a while for whatever reason.
But we do. We do trade comments, pithy comments, on Skype. For activity.
And of course, Oatly spottings in the wild. Those are always fun.
I'm still looking. I haven't seen any Oatly in Maine. Well, let me guess. The stock's still $2, so I guess it's not here. But,
I told you that when I sent you, it was the last one on the shelf. So is that a good sign? I don't know. It was the only thing on that shelf. So maybe stock's $1.95 now. So it has broken the $2 handle. I guess the lack of finding stock has been no bueno. For CEO Tony Peterson. He's been running it since 2012. So Tony needs to get his acting gear out there and get more Oatly on the shelves for the peoples to buy. As we keep on rolling right on into the trading block.
It's time to break down the latest topics, trades, and trends in the world of options. It's time for the Trading Block.
All right, everybody, welcome to the Trading Block, the portion of the show where we do just that. We break down what the heck is trading out there in these crazy Fed-driven markets, listeners. And, yesterday was a bit of a topsy-turvy one. We talked about it a bit. It was kind of popping off live when we were doing options boot camp yesterday. We have a habit of doing that show, doing Fed announcements, it seems like a lot of late. And it happened again yesterday, and the markets were kind of topsy-turvy. We were kind of middling in the day, then rallying. Then, of course, once Powell stuck his dagger in the heart of the markets, we turned to the dark side, and it was a pretty aggressive sell-off yesterday. Today, coming into the start of the show, we were seeing more red on the screen. We have mitigated it somewhat. Let's see, how low did we get? We bounced right off the 3,700 level this morning, listeners, 3,701. And then the S&P tried to rally, got up to about 3,740. Then they gave up the ghost again. Then they have rallied again, back up to about almost 37.5 before giving up a little bit of that again. We're kind of off about almost half a point right now, about 0.4 of a point, a little over 16 handle, still trading a little bit north of that 3740 level out there. So we're still red on the day, but not threatening to break the 3,700 level, at least for right now. The Dow has been a weird beast for a while now. It also threatened a lot of psychological levels were tested this morning, 31,750 in the Dow before they kind of bounced off that as well. It's off about a little over a tenth, about 0.15% out there for the Dow right now. The NASDAQ leading the charts to the dark side, as it is wont to do, off about 0.85% right now. Of course, all this coming on the heels of our friend, Mr. Powell, saying, you know what, everyone was hoping for some ray of sunshine, some glimmer of hope. Well, I shouldn't say everyone. So a lot of people were expecting it. It seemed like this consensus had built, like, okay, this rate thing is behind us. You know me, I'm listening to the show for a while. I'm a bit of a cynic myself out there, so I wasn't exactly expecting this woohoo from Powell, because you don't usually get it, and we didn't get it yesterday. He said, hey, we're going to keep raising until the job is done, and right now inflation is job one. Bit of a huge swing from what he said not too long ago, just a couple of years ago, August of 2020, where he's like, yeah, Fed, inflation, we're going to kind of let that off the chain a little bit. And then now I bet he's wishing he could dial some of those words back. But hindsight, always 2020 out there. And the fact that he's not going to let up on the crazy rate increases for the foreseeable future spooked a lot of people. And so we went down to the races and down to the races again today. All this, though, to say we haven't seen a lot of evolution on the vol front. In fact, down yesterday, down again today, even though we are off the lows. And what is VIX? VIX is down again, listeners. VIX is down to about a 25.30 when we kicked off the show. Down about exactly a point from where it was on Monday's show. Oh, this level is looking so good. Would have looked so good just a week and change ago, listeners. Alas, water under the bridge now. VVIX at about an 80, so up about 2 points. Not much. It's still hanging out at a pretty low level. I wonder if the Rock Lobster has some thoughts about that. Given all this action we're seeing out there, VVIX not really measuring up, at least for right now. VXX starting to do things again, which is always fascinating. 1760 when we kicked off the show, down about 0.2 of a point. UVXY 9 3/4, so back below the 10 handle, listeners, down about 0.15 from where we were on Monday's show. Is that it? Are we going to see the reverse split now? Is this it? Is this it? Everyone keeps asking. We're back below a 10 handle, so we're on the right path at least. SVIX 1220 up about 0.2 of a point. Of course, that's our inverse friend. UVIX was at about a 990 when we kicked off the show. It has dropped a little bit. That was a little bit before the show, actually, because it's about 9.5 right now. So it was up about 0.15. That puts it down now about 0.25 on the day. So UVIX taking a bit of a break. UVIX, obviously, our levered friend out there. And then speaking of friends, we've always got Vol Q in store for us. Vol Q is, of course, the at-the-money vol of the NASDAQ 100. It was up about exactly 2/3 of a point. It has given up about a little over a half of that now, half a point back. So we're pretty much up about 0.15. So all this a long way around, Mr. Rock Lobster, to saying we have seen some action in the market. We have seen some movement. We're not seeing a heck of a lot of volatility. But let's start there. What were your thoughts yesterday on what Mr. Powell had to say? His bit of a groin kick to the market, if you will, And then B, what are your thoughts on what we're seeing in the market today and the response or perhaps lack thereof in the vol space?
It definitely was a what's, I guess, and I should think like, why do I think the guy is gonna? I never thought he was gonna pivot. Let's say stop raising rates, and I'm still trying to figure out what the market was looking for. Inflation's not going down, and they're going to probably raise rates up to maybe 6% by next year.
They wanted Powell to come out with a nice birthday hat and a little streamer and say, "Woohoo, party's on, let's dance."
Right. I guess so. And I guess, I don't know. I was thinking we could have some kind of pop because maybe, they weren't going to get, let's say, more aggressive. I guess I'm overestimating. I'm like, I don't think he's going to be more aggressive than the rate hikes that they have planned. So I figured that the market would like that, right? It would be a little bit more of a bullish move. But no, not at all. I mean, he's like, well, I think the biggest concern, what I heard, I think that really flipped stocks was they're still worried about short-term inflation. They're not seeing that moderate, and you still have, again, I think these are a lot of, there are a lot of government-created problems. They've stacked up over the last couple of years. Maybe you could go back 3-4 years. Who knows, right? When Powell, I think Powell started like getting easy on interest rates in like 2018, as I recall. Remember that? We had the Volmageddon and all that stuff. And so I think this is just, it's like a lot of things sometimes where the seeds have been sown for this, and this was just, you just need something to kick things over the edge. And that's where we are from the inflation point of view. Now, the mitigating circumstances, I think, are two things. One is the technology growth and internet growth has been hugely productive, driving productivity way up. So technology there. And I think the second part was, post-pandemic, all these people are going to, I think they're still getting, some people, I think in Maine, still getting paid for not working. Eventually that will stop. And that's also created a lot of supply problems for companies. Like, I mean, there's still, at least in Maine, there are help wanted signs everywhere. And I don't recall seeing that many, way back when. So it's a little, like, what happened to the workforce? We still have 10 million open jobs, or some amazing amount of open jobs. It's so, the economy was working pretty well, right? When Biden took office. So it's all of these things. And I think, in having these jobs open, this is still like the economy is still working. So can Powell manage a soft landing, just bringing interest rates back to where they, probably should be based on, demand? Having zero interest rates and selling houses, house prices went up. It's like, so I think we're stuck with, they have to get out of the mess they created. And to Powell's credit at this point, he was a little late to his own party when, like, even we were talking about this last year, like, this is crazy, right? Another government spending more money. And they were like this, and it's not just this government, but the G7 in general. Japan has been trying this routine for 20-something years, 25 years. I think since 1990, since their real estate crisis, they try to, fix it, basically. So the good thing is though, that we have at least a market system. And right now the market system is like, okay, rates are going to 4%. If you want to sell bonds, you're going to have to sell them with a decent coupon on it. We have, like, that is the thing that I would say, besides laws, probably keeps the U.S. rolling. So How politicians respond, I mean, I haven't heard any response from the U.S. gov on spending. Nothing. Not from either side. The first thing I've heard about anything is the new prime minister in England is going to try some kind of what they call, I love it when they say austerity, right? That means we're just not going to spend as much as we spent last year, or we're going to spend the same. It's austerity. The government's not spending. So I think they're going to have no choice but to get off the spending mode because of, borrowing money now is going to cost. So, where does the stock market fit in this? It is the tail on the dog, and at this point, Powell said as much. He's like, hey, I'm more worried about the bond market, and right now we got to raise rates, but I don't want to create a huge problem, in the next year. So how all this works, I don't know. I don't think anybody really knows. But I think it does damp down like that, those early rallies. We might get a little surprised, let's say maybe after the elections, if they go smooth, if we get election results. I mean, Brazil got election results in 24 hours or less than 24 hours. The U.S. somehow can't do that, which blows my mind. I can't even, like it's your only job. You got one job for the whole year. That's to deliver the votes to the right place, and you can't do it. So it's a little odd, I think. But anyway, these are all the things that are contributing to market volatility. But today you have, the Dow's down a little, SPX is down a little, the Q's down a little, down the most, and VIX is down because I think our range is kind of set. 3,500 was the recent low. The straddle's about $200. So unless something new comes out, volatility doesn't have really any reason to expand, and we should see volatility come in a little bit, actually, because we do have the election coming up, and then after that, you got the holidays, you got Christmas, and we have another CPI coming out, and at this point, though, I would guess that the market's already assuming now it's going to be hot, and if it's just a little less hot, maybe we get that little pop, but that's what we have. And I think thankfully the employment picture looks pretty good. And it's what I thought too this year we would see more of is like people just going back to work from the whole COVID thing. Everybody forgets you took a huge amount of the workforce out of work, and now you got to stick them back to work. So you would think that would grow business and get the economy kind of moving along again. So anyway, I think that's kind of where we are. We're sort of stuck in that area, and but I think a lot of the big upside moves in SPX are done for the short term. I don't think we're going to see them anymore, just because the Fed is finally taking away everybody's last hope for the big move is kind of over.
Andrew,
bit of a rant.
Sticking the knife in. No more hope for you upside folks out there. If you want hope for a return into the office, apparently Mr. Musk says you got to return or you're done at Twitter over there. He's bringing everybody back. So at least Musk is bringing your folks back, Andrew. Says the man who's out in a compound in the middle of nowhere and hasn't been to an office in 10 years, 20 years?
Something like that.
So you have opted out, but you want everyone else to opt in. I get where you're coming from. I'm just giving you a hard time. Let's get on out to the actual market. Speaking of the markets, before I get to the numbers for today, Mr. Rock Lobster, we've got some other cool numbers in our hot little hands. It is that time, listeners. It is the time when our friends from OCC provide us with the numbers for last month. What was October like from an overall options volume perspective? And Mr. Rock Lobster, before I reveal the numbers, and you can, of course, cheat. It's up to your own recognizance. But would you guess October a more active or less active month than, let's say, a year ago in October of 2021?
I am not cheating, and I would guess it was much more active.
The answer is yes, it was much more active. 10.2% increase, sir, in terms of overall total volume. Total volume in October, 910 million contracts. Again, up 10.2% from October 2021, and the fifth highest month now in the history of the business. September was the third highest. It bumped August down to number 4. August was previously the third highest. So you got pretty much a strip there. September, August, and now October slotting in at number 5. All of them north of that 900 million contracts in a month level. Why is that significant? Well, because we're closing in, listeners, on that 1 billion contracts in a single trading month. Now, if you're new to the business, a lot of you are, you may say, well, that's kind of just what I expect now. I expect these kinds of numbers. And I can certainly understand that from your frame of reference. That's what you've been seeing for the last couple of years. But right before the pandemic, the entire industry did 3 to 4 billion contracts in a year. So to be pushing nearly 1 billion contracts in a month, that's just a sea change in terms of how many people are using these products, how many people are trading them, and continue to trade them in spite of what's going on out there in the broad market, which is always good news to everyone here on this show. And of course, to a lot of you out there listening, we all want volume. That just begets liquidity and action and everything else we need from these markets. Tight spreads, of course. Let's go out to the ADV, year-to-date average daily volume, listeners. An important number because that tells us if we're on track to beat last year or not. And the ADV through October, 41.1 million contracts. That's up 5.6% from this time last year. So we've been debating it for most of the year on shows like the Advisor's Option. Can we possibly beat it? Can we do it again? I mean, last year, closing in on 10 billion contracts, it seemed like a bit of an outlier year. Could we possibly do it again? If these numbers are to be believed, listeners, the answer seems to be yes. A few other highlights out there. ETF options volume. So your SPYs and your Qs and all that fun. 57.4%. Your BIDOs. A BIDO probably actually a big chunk of that now that I think about that. Up 57.4%. So there really was no BIDO. Actually, it had just launched, I believe, about this time a year ago. So you're seeing new products coming online, driving those numbers up. Previously, you saw volume up, but ETF and index options tended to languish. They were the kind of lone dark spots out there, and maybe VIX futures if you threw that in there as well. But single name options were doing well, obviously, and that was lifting everything. But yeah, the indexes and the ETFs not doing well. Index options this past month up 74% from a year ago. They don't have a new BIDO to blame, so it's just a lot more paper, and we're seeing that out in the S, right? It's over 1 million contracts pretty much every time we talk about it now. So the numbers are there. See if we can find any other highlights out here really quickly. You know what? And as I mentioned, futures were one of the black spots, one of the few black spots in the past. Futures remain one of the lone dark spots this past month as well. Everything else was up orders of magnitude. Actually, I'm not taking it back. Overall equity options volume, so single name equity options volume, was down 14.9%, 544,000 contracts October of 2021, 463 million contracts this past October. So that's interesting. So maybe some of the meme stock bloom has come off the rose, but obviously a lot of that attention has shifted to your SPYs and your Qs and your SPX and everything else out there because the ETF and index options are knocking it out of the park. How long have I been saying that on the show, listeners? We're in a bit of a macro-driven market right now. So when that stuff tends to be moving and shaking, the micro stuff, the single name stuff tends to fall by the wayside a little bit. And we're seeing that reflected in these numbers as well. And also the other highlight I wanted to mention, VIX futures down 3.2%, 4.47 million contracts this time last year, 4.32 million contracts this year. So VIX futures continue to struggle, Mr. Rock Lobster, in spite of everything else going out there. Any of those numbers surprise you? The fact that VIX futures still down year over year, or that equity options taking a bit of a hit? Any of that surprised you, sir?
Well, I mean, year over year, it doesn't surprise me that equity options took a hit because all the stocks are down like 80%. Look at Qualcomm. I mean, Apple at least is somewhat up there, but it's losing a little bit of its gas today. And look at all those crazy tech stocks. Shopify was $1,800 or $1,600, and it dropped pre-split all the way down to, I don't know, $200, $250, right? So literally 2020 and 2021 have been just wiped out, right? That's a like refrain that, an option pit, we're just like figure this whole inflated equity market just came right back to where it was. So it would not surprise me that equity volume is down because if somebody famous said this, I don't know who it was. Maybe it was me. Like, options love a bull market. They do. October was a pretty good month. What we're at 10 or 11, 13, 14% or something for the month of October. And you saw a huge volume. Folks aren't, traders aren't dumb. They like, oh, wow, stocks are low. They have a chance to go up. Buy some calls. Or stocks are low. We'll buy some calls. So, any kind of a lift or bull market, the option traders come back for that. So I just look at that and I say, yeah, that's totally reasonable thing at this point. So it doesn't surprise me that we're lower year over year just because, October last year, things were crazy. Like if you look at some of the prices on some of the stocks last year versus this year, and this is a trade that some of our students are doing, right? Roku's $52 right now. And a year ago, it was $300. So I think it topped out at 4 something. So you look at that and yeah, is there opportunity now? I think, yeah, but I think there's some burnt fingers from the last year in Roku. So, but there's a zillion stocks like that as well. I mean, Qualcomm is down 50%. It's like a single digit PE because everybody's worried about phone sales. And what's funny is I think one of the things that I guess people won't get rid of will keep paying their phone bills, but maybe they'll buy less phones. Who knows, right? But that put a little damper on the market as well. So you don't have the ups, you walk in, the stock was $100, now it's $140. That brings the call buyers in. And right now it's a much more difficult market, right? It's very whippy. I mean, we were trading 3,900 SPX yesterday. I literally turned around. I was trying to place a couple orders to sell some SPY calls and some calendars I had. And I don't know, I got sidetracked for about 10 minutes. And like the market was gone. I think SPY or SPX was down 100 points instantly. Like, whoa, what the heck happened? So I think that's a lot more difficult market to trade options in because you don't have the momentum changes on any given day. So anyway, I just think that's the market that we have right now. If anything now, you would, I guess, as we get to the next Fed meeting, there will be that pivot talk again or whatever, but employment number looks okay. And then we have a CPI number coming out again. And at this point, Powell has kind of stayed the course. I mean, we could argue about whether he's going to, change his mind or not, but there hasn't been any data out there for him to change his mind. So I think we have the market that we have, and it's not changing. So that's the gig. That's the gig that we have right now. So that's again another little roundabout way on the volume. But until we have a little bit of a base formed, and stocks look like they're kind of bottomed out somewhat, the retail won't be back in. And remember, retail came in hard in 2021 because those stocks were doing crazy things and all that money was flying around. It's going to be a while till I think they're back in. It wouldn't surprise me if next year's volume is actually lower than this year's volume. That would not surprise me, at least pretty much flat. So we'll see what those numbers come out. But, all I know is that it has brought more people to option pit. So people looking for ways to, trade a bull market or a bear market or stuff like that. So, or understanding different strategies. So where you're not just kind of long only. So it's been good for us and for our students, but not necessarily good for the 401ks and stuff like that this year if you're just long only stock.
Rough year to be a buy and holder. That's why we tell you all the time, listeners. And to all the legion of new listeners who are out there, you can't just ride the elevator up and ride it back down. You got to do some stuff in between. And that's kind of what the whole network is about. So hopefully you've been listening and taking advantage and learning. I saw someone tweeted something recently on Twitter that her boyfriend had lost a ridiculous amount of money trading options. And that's always terrible. One of our pro listeners replied to her, said she needs to get a pro subscription for her boyfriend so he could learn what he's doing. Yes, that would certainly help. But yeah, these are rough times for everybody out there. You got to know your limitations is always good advice in a market like this. And if you're overwhelmed, hey, there's worse things than cash, and picking your poison, picking your moments where you want to get back in, starting to nibble where you're a little bit more comfortable. Speaking of nibbling, let's see if people are nibbling or devouring when it comes to these markets today out there, listeners. And the answer is kind of a little bit of both, actually, because we are still, of course, in earnings season, still waiting for the updated earnings move result, and earnings season reports from our friends over there at ORATS. As soon as we have those in our hot little hands, we will get those to you, because there are some big names popping off this week. We had Uber on Tuesday, Pfizer, Toyota, BP, AMD, good old Canada Goose, where everyone's writing all those puts. That was just Tuesday. Wednesday, CVS, Cedar Fair, Roku, Qualcomm, and the old Hood, a.k.a. Robinhood. Thursday, we had Moderna. We have Crocs, we have Peloton. Can they turn things around? Will they still be a dumpster fire? I guess we'll find out. PayPal, Coinbase, good old S-Bucks, and DoorDash. Tomorrow we got DraftKings, Duke Energy, a.k.a. the Duck, and Hershey out there. That's just a handful of the names that are popping off right now. And all this Sturm and Drang from the Fed, as well as all this single name action, is conspiring for a wee bit of volume out there. As of right now, VIX at nearly 400,000 contracts, 391,000 contracts on the tape. In VIX land today, the ADV still hanging out north of 500,000 contracts. Let's go out to the SPY. SPY at a little bit north of 5.27 million contracts right now. The ADV is lurking close to that 8 million threshold it's been hanging out at for a while. The S, 1.81 million. So we are on track to do some business in the S today, listeners. The ADV still hanging out right around that 2.5 million contracts level. Small caps, quite literally on fire. 804,000 contracts on the tape. The ADV a little bit north of 900,000, so it seems like it's going to hit that today. If you want a deeper dive into small caps, stay tuned. I'll be coming back in about a little less than an hour now to talk all things futures options, including small caps, on TWIFO in a little bit. And then, of course, the Qs, 1.85 million, the ADV, 2.6 million. All these SPY and Qs and S, all these numbers contributing to why the index and ETF numbers are just off the charts last month, listeners. Let's see if the single names can keep pace. And the answer is, yeah, they're doing pretty decent numbers today. Cost you 265,000 contracts to break into the top 10 today, listeners. That gets you to Roku. We've been talking about Roku a lot. They have obviously had earnings this week, as I just mentioned. They were earlier in the week. And they've been feeling a lot of action, a lot of volatility ever since, including today. They've had quite the range today. $44.50 was the low. $53.35 was the upside. My goodness. Roku bringing it, even though their net still down about 3.5% on the day today. Good for 265,000 contracts. My goodness. Close to a 9-point range on the day for Roku. That's a lot of action out there for Roku. And still only number 10. We've just begun our journey, listeners. Number 9, our old friend, Pabst Blue Ribbon, a.k.a. PBR. 313,000 contracts. Of course, it's Petrobras. Don't let me confuse you with my jokes, listeners. It's just too good to pass up. 13.25, up about $0.50 today. You know them. They are the old state-run, loves to pay themselves some sweet divvies. Petroleum company out of Brazil. Good for 313,000 contracts today. Number 8, we've got Softy. They've kind of been glued in around that 8 spot for a while. 318,000 contracts for them. They're off 3.75 or nearly 2%. Right around 216 and change is where they're trading right now. So interesting day for Softy. They sold off from 220 and about a half very quickly this morning down to 216 and change. Then they rallied it. Then they sold it off again to even lower, down to 215.91. Then they tried rallying it again, got up to 218.25, and now it is dropping again. So they've done a lot of living already out there in Softy. Number 7, Got the chips popping in a little bit sooner than usual, listeners. We've got NVIDIA coming in at number 7, 397,000 contracts on the tape. Trading right now 134, about 70, up about $2.50. This one's had a pretty hefty range today as well. A low of 129 and about a half, and a high of 137.81. So this one's had a lot of action today already. Number 6, we've got good old Google, aka Alphabet, 448,000 contracts on the tape. Alphabet, 84 and about a half. Maybe we should add Alphabet to that. It was $100 not too long ago. Now we should say 95 and below range for which one would you rather buy poll. It's off $2.50 today for Alphabet. Again, good for 448,000 contracts. Speaking of names, which one would you rather buy? Number 5, Meta, aka Facebook, 605,000 contracts on the tape. My goodness, how they have come for this one. $89.50 now. It was just at 100. When we were talking about our poll, it was just right around 100. My goodness. 10% discount pretty much since we launched our poll, listeners. $89.50. Meta, aka Facebook, just cannot get out of its own way these days. My goodness, they keep coming for this one. 605,000 contracts on the tape. If you have a vote in our poll, I'm curious which way you folks lean. I kind of know which way you were leaning. It's been pretty one-sided, let's say. We'll reveal it in a few minutes, but yeah, you folks not feeling the love for Meta. Let's put it out there. Number 4, AMD, back to the chip zone. That's hanging out where it usually is, right around number 4. Doing a little bit more paper, though. 605,000 contracts. AMD bucking the trend up nearly $2.50, or $61 is where it's trading right now. I had a range of about $58 on the dark side and $62.28 on the upside. So right around 4.25 for the range for AMD. So impressive range, not what some of the other names are putting out there today, but still interesting stuff. The other half of our will they, won't they poll this week, we've got the Amazonians, north of a million, 1.3 million contracts on the tape. Man, it's been a while since we've seen an M handle out there for the Amazonians. They're also down to about $90 right now, nearly 2%. My goodness, how the mighty have fallen, listeners. They've had a low of $89 and a high of 93.5, so about $4.50 for a range for the Amazonians today, and hanging out right around $90.30 right now. My goodness, and we're not even done yet, listeners. Number 2, the Fruit Company, 1.33 million contracts, just managing to take the number 2 spot. Apple down to 140 again, so giving up nearly $5 or 3.3%. So giving up a good chunk of that day it had just, what was it, last week, or the best day it's had since March of 2020. They're giving up a good chunk of that today. How low did they get? 139.25. So they're about a little bit north of that, about $1 almost north of that right now. So yeah, the market doesn't like a day when Apple is red, and it is decidedly red today. Let's see, how high do we get in the big love fest recently? 155.75. Yeah, it shot up from 144.80 to 155.75. So we are back below now, listeners, where it was when it shot up after all that madness. Interesting. Can we threaten the 52-week low, 129.04? We shall see. That will be an interesting bellwether for the market. If Apple tests new lows, that's going to turn some heads, I think. And then number 1, it's a day that ends in Y. You know, we got some drama on this name. Tesla, 1.4 million contracts on the tape. Actually up about 30 cents, 215.25. Tesla managing to buck the trend. It's got his low of 210.14 today and a high of 221.20. So pretty much almost exactly at $11 range on the day. My goodness. Tesla, moving, rocking and rolling, putting up some numbers out there today. Of course, you guys can check all that fun stuff for yourselves, theoptionsinsider.com. Click on the Options News and Articles tab. As soon as we have the updated earnings move result, and earnings season reports, we'll get them out to you. Right now, our most recent updated report has the season hanging out at about a pretty impressive 134%. That's a lot. So we shall see if we can keep those numbers, keep those percentages when we kick off the most recent reports. Meanwhile, it is time to kick off the Odd Block.
It's time to break down the most interesting, unusual, and downright questionable options activity that's been identified by theoptionsinsider.com. It's time for the Odd Block.
All right, let's do it. Let's get weird. Let's get wild, Mr. Rock Lobster. We're already coming up against it. We've been gassing on, having a lot of fun, a lot of numbers to talk about out there today. Speaking of talking about some numbers, let's talk about some performance, Mr. Rock Lobster. Let's go out to everyone's favorite tax prep name, H&R Block, ticker symbol HRB, a.k.a. the Herb. I won't tell you where it's trading right now, a little bit of a spoiler, but back on October 6th, listeners, talked about somebody coming in and overwriting the October 43 calls. They sold those for 85 cents, 5,087 times. The stock was $41.87 when these went up. It was about a 34 ball. It's not bad. They had earnings coming up, but not in the life cycle of these options. The earnings are on November 1st, so they didn't want to write the options through earnings. And let's see. It looks like, Mr. Rock Lobster, these never really got close. The high for the stock, they sold the 43 strike list, and the stock was 41.87 when they sold these calls. And the high for the stock after this day, after this trade, was $41.11. And they kind of pretty much never looked back from there and ended up closing right around the 41 handle, 41.02. So these bad boys worked out. Looks like paper ended up pocketing somewhere in the neighborhood of $430,000. Mr. Rock Lobster, what are your thoughts on someone pocketing a little cash on the old Herb?
On the old H&R Block. A little early for that. Usually, doesn't it more trade around tax time?
You would think, but hey, this person thought they had a little bit of action, and they did. It worked out.
And they just took their money and they were feeling victorious in HRB. Oh, look at that. So I guess, we don't know what anybody did with the stock because there's probably some sort of override. But still, hey, 5,000 calls at almost $1 a call. That's not bad. I would say that's a successful buy rate.
I think we take terrible. That 85 cents. What's 85 cents 5,000 times amongst friends these days, listeners? Let's go on out to our next name. If you don't want to get the old Herb, maybe you want to grab something. This is Grab Holdings Limited, ticker symbol Grab. This is based out of Singapore. And let's see, we talked about them back on the show on September 15th. Someone was grabbing for some grab calls. See what we did there, listeners? At the time, 4,492 of the October 3.5 calls were going up. Paper was lifting the offer for 15 cents, saying, gimme, gimme, gimme. 77 vol. So this had some of the whiff of 2021 paper to it, listeners. It was a cheapy name. The stock was $3.08 when these went up. They were paying not quite triple digits, but pretty close to it. Pretty lofty vol levels for some out-of-the-money calls that were expiring in the near term. This had all the whiffs of 2021 paper to it. There were no earnings in this cycle. The earnings are on November 10th, so we still haven't seen those. So interesting to see. And then they came back and did more. A total of 12,000 of these traded on the day, Mr. Rock Lobster. And then if you run the numbers, you will see, Mr. Rock Lobster, that they could not have been more wrong with this trade. The stock fell out of bed almost instantaneously after this trade was done, Mr. Rock Lobster. It was at 3:08 when they put the calls on. It fell out of bed. They tried to rally it. It had a brief resurgence back to 3:01, and then that was all she wrote. Otherwise, it spent all the rest of the time that this trade was active well below $3. The stock ended up closing on expiration $2.36. So they never really had a chance with these things. They dropped on that initial print of 4,400, 67,000 on that one. If you tally up all the paper on the day, and again, we don't know if all of that was the same print. Obviously, maybe they was doing more in blocks. It could have been other paper inspired by this. But if you add it all up, then it would be somewhere in the neighborhood of $180,000. So, Mr. Rock Lobster, that first block is going to cost you, let's say, a decent BMW or maybe an Audi, something like that. And if you do all the paper, it's going to cost you a pretty nice BMW or Mercedes, and getting into a decent used Ferrari, one of your metrics, sir.
Well, there's a reason why I do that, why I use those metrics. This stock was an interesting one just because wasn't this Grab this is like the DoorDash of Indonesia or something? Or
I know they're based out of Singapore. They have a subsidiary called Bento Invest.
It's some sort of internet gig economy something. I have this. This is one of those stocks where just money has gone to die. So it looks like somebody else just bought a bunch of paper and they just got smoked. No, no love, no particular love right there. What else are you going to say about it?
No love at all. You don't want to grab any more grab. The grabbing is done, at least for right now. Let's see, where is grab hanging out? And maybe it's had a huge resurgence. And it has actually turned around a bit. It's up 13 cents today, or nearly 5%. Trading 284 right now, Mr. Rock Lobster. So it's looking a lot better than it was at expiration. It's up about 50 cents. So it's not $3.50, but it's better. So this guy would have been looking a little bit better, but still, alas. His was a bridge too far. Listen, let's go out now to September 12th to everyone's other favorite name. Not quite as cheap. We're talking a little over $10 now when we were talking about this one. This was ATUS USA. This is cable provider out of NYC. Ticker symbol ATUS, ATUS. At the time, back on September 12th, we talked about someone coming in and scooping up nearly 10,000, 9,773 of the SEP 11s. They paid 40 cents, so close to the offer for these. The stock was $10.80. These are pretty much at the money calls, listeners. There were no earnings in this cycle. The earnings were on November 3rd, so they're actually today. So I guess we could find out today what's going on with ATUS, and we'll get to that in a second. That explains the action we've seen out there today. And they liked this so much more, they came back and did a total of 17,000 of these on the day, listeners. And this was another one where they could not have been more wrong again, Mr. Rock Lobster. We're 0 for 3 here. We've got, actually, no, the override did well. So we're 1 for 3 here because they bought all these calls, they loaded up, and then the stock just immediately fell out of bed. It was $10.80 right when they did this trade, listeners. And let's see, that was September 12th. And by September 15th, it was trading $9. By September 19th, it was trading $8. By the 27th, it was trading $6. And the stock ended up closing on October expiration at $5.60. Not that far from the low it had previously set. The low for the year was somewhere around $5.30. I say previously because it's exploring new lows today. But we'll get to that in a second. But stock closed at $5.60. Obviously, a far cry from the 11 handle they were looking for with their 10,000 lot in total of nearly 17,000. So that first block dropped nearly 400 grand on that one, listeners. If you add up all the rest of the volume, you're talking nearly $700,000, $680,000 were dropped on some optimistic upside paper in ATUS. And if they were still holding any underlying or anything, Mr. Rock Lobster, they're looking even worse because obviously the numbers were today and they were not good. The stock is off another 28% right now, or $1.75. It's trading $4.50. So let's just summarize this. It was trading nearly $11. This person came in and loaded up on 17,000 of the 11 calls, and it has just become a dumpster fire literally ever since, Mr. Rock. This person might have bought the near-term high. So this is kind of a bit of an ouchie, Mr. Rock Lobster.
We've looked at this for big money flow, and we just stayed away from it because there was a lot of call buying. Like, I don't get how just a internet broadband provider could just keep going to zero. Like,
they have no more customers in all of New York. Everyone's shut down all their cable in New York.
I don't get it. So all I know is, this stock, they have small drops. I guess, net income has dropped a bunch, but I can't quite figure out what the deal with this company is. It feels like it's been around for a long time. It's just, and I think a year ago it was like a 20. I'm sure somebody probably bought this because it might have been anyway, it was an $18 stock at the beginning of the year, and now it's $4.
Yeah, we were talking about that. I remember when this trade went up, we were talking about, like, really, what's going on with this cable provider? How volatile can a cable provider be? Who's buying all these? It's like not a biotech, right? It's a cable provider. How much pop can you get? And it turns out you can get a lot of pop in the wrong direction. in these
get
names.
A lot of down pop.
Yes, down pop.
Maybe they had a short equity position in it, or what? But all I know is this. So anyway, it was. I couldn't figure it out. I couldn't figure out why anybody would want to buy those calls. So we stayed away.
This is some bad down pop. Might be some of the worst down pop I've seen, Mr. Rock Lobster.
Yes.
You don't want to be holding calls through this down pop. They say their subscriber numbers have just fallen off a cliff, apparently, after everyone back in New York is going back to the office. I don't know. But yeah, you think broadband would still be holding up well, but apparently not. My goodness. Let's pivot away from this aggressive down pop, listeners. Let's talk about some larger, crazier down pop with our question of the week. It is time for the mail block.
It's time to take your seat on the All-Star panel as we read your emails, tweets, Facebook messages, website comments, and much more. It's time for the mail block.
All right, everybody. Let's do it. Let's talk about some size down pop out there this week. And we're doing that because, as I mentioned earlier in the show, two big names have really just taken a drubbing of late, listeners. That is Amazon and Facebook. When we posted this poll earlier this week, they were both around 100 or a little bit below. I think maybe Meta might have been 96 or so at that point, but they were both right around $100. And we said, hey, Meta, Amazon, both of them right around $100. Simple question this week. Which one would you rather buy? The old Amazonians, the old Metas, or neither? You're washing your hands of all of it. And Mr. Rocklobster, as I mentioned, both of them have taken aggressive shellackings, or as we like to put it here on the show now, a little bit of a bad down pop here for Meta. Meta right now, right around $89 and change. It's like it has rebounded a little bit. It got as low as 88.5 earlier. And we've got the Amazonians right now at $90. So they're still in lockstep, both almost at $90. So they both given up 10%, but this poll is still relevant. They're still right around the same price, Mr. Rock Lobster. So first question, if you have a choice, Mr. Rock Lobster, which of these two are you buying, gun to your head right now? And then B, what do you think our audience is voting for?
Wow, that's a tough one. I just don't like either of them. I don't have any of it anymore. I think I own 10 shares of Amazon.
You could choose neither. It is a third choice if you really want.
And I don't like Amazon. I'm sorry, Facebook at all. I just don't like the whole Zuckerberg, his whole thing. So I'm definitely on the neither. I think people though would lean more toward Amazon because it still has some of that darling the darling capacity.
Yeah, our audience is all over Amazon, Mr. Rock Lobster. 70.5%. Every day that percentage gets higher for Amazon out there. 70.5% for Amazon, 17.9% for Facebook, and 11.5% saying we're hanging out in the Rock Lobster camp. We don't want to touch either. They're both dumpster fires. This week, at least, that was the right choice because both of them taking a drubbing this week. But yeah, you have a choice, listeners. Have you voted already? At Options is the place to go to make your voice heard, listeners. As we go into our final segment, it is time to go around the block.
It's time to tell you what we'll be watching on our trading screens until the next episode. It's time for Around the Block.
All right, everybody. Let's talk about what we're keeping an eye on until our next episode on Monday through the weekend. We had the big event of the week. That was, of course, the Fed. We're still kind of dealing with the ramifications and ripples from that. But we also have a lot of earnings on the docket. Vol doing its thing right now, which is a bit of an interesting one. Mr. Rock Lobster, what are you keeping an eye on through the weekend until our next episode, sir?
I think the thing that I find most interesting is just, okay, but where do we go? Are we a market that is off the Fed grift, basically? Okay, hey, we need companies need earnings, companies need products, ideas, whatever. So I think I wonder if we're finally off the caffeine or whatever, the sugar high that stocks have been on for the last few years. So for me, I would like to see actual VIX go down. I think that would be closetly bullish because that's taking some of the volatility out of the market. So that's what I'm looking at. So, but all the big earnings are out. So, I mean, I think that's what we got. And yeah, we could, the world could probably use some good news somewhere. Maybe the Ukraine battle stops, or who knows. Something positive would be nice. But I mean, as of right now, we're just going kind of headlong into rates are going up and oil supplies still look tight, and we're going into winter. There you go. So I like to be more upbeat than that, but that's about all I got in the upbeat part.
That's your upbeat version of the Rock Lobster, listeners. Unfortunately, no Uncle Mike out here to counterbalance him. Usually it's a bit of a yin and yang on the show, dark side and light side. Today, all dark side all the time, listeners. Unfortunately, that music means we come to the end of this go-around here for the old OB. But don't worry, if you need a little more content in your lives, I'll be back in a little bit with Twifo This Week in Futures Options. Our old buddy, Mr. Dan Collins, formerly managing editor of Futures Mag, is going to be joining me on the show. I'm talking to him in ages. That'll be kind of interesting to see what's going on, what his perspective is on these crazy markets out there for equities, for nat gas, for energy, for everything that's lighting it up out there. What's on the movers and shakers report? You got to tune into Twifo every week to find out. And Mr. Rock Lobster, if folks want to find out what's going on your Spy Master, and everything else, where should they go? What should they do?
Yeah, 888-301. Ask for Ted or other Andrew. You get 10% off. You say, hey, we listen to the show here. So there you go.
OptionPit.com is the place to go. We got to get on out of here. Again, back in a little bit for Twifo. For all you pro folks, you'll get it live. For all you on-demand folks, that will be on the network a little bit later on out there. Of course, if you wanted immediate, you know where to go. TheOptionsInsider.com/pro is the place to go to join that party. Back again tomorrow, noon Central, 1 p.m. Eastern for Volatility Views. Back after that for all you pro folks once again for Options Oddities. Then back again next Monday, another episode of The Option Block. Stay safe out there, everybody.
You're listening to the Options Insider Radio Network, the home of the Options Podcast. For more quality options programs, visit theoptionsinsider.com or search for Options Insider Radio Network in your podcast provider of choice. Listeners can also access all of our programming through our mobile app available in the iTunes and Google Play stores. Select programs are also available via live stream at mixlr.com/options-insider. That's mixlr.com/options-insider. Don't forget to follow along with your favorite programs and submit your own questions for the hosts at twitter.com/options, stocktwits.com/options, facebook.com/theoptionsinsider, or via questions at theoptionsinsider.com.